The economists tend to think that there's two sources of growth in society. One of those is employed labor force growth, and the other one is productivity. And what we've been taught to do, especially in the past 50 years, I mean, policymakers, economists, commentators, and so on, is that we should focus everything on productivity. So everything has to be about productivity. And this is when in your political life, you'll probably have been around this. You may have espoused some of it. We need to, deregulate something, or we need to encourage entrepreneurship or anything like that. And all those things are great. I'm not denouncing them. They're great. But that monomaniacal focus on productivity, I think, is misguided. It's one of two variables. The other variable is employed labor force growth. And to get employed labor force growth, you need two things. First of all, you need potential labor force growth, which is, of course, population. So you need the society to reproduce itself. It really is that simple. And without that, your economy will stagnate. It won't work. We've seen that in Japan. The second thing you need to make sure that potential labor force is employed is that they're employable. And what we see is, when you have enormous amounts of family breakdown, you also have an enormous amount of people that can't seem to work. Now, some economists will say, well, just cut the welfare spending, they'll return to work. I think the evidence for that is fairly limited. I think there's just as much of a possibility that you cut that welfare spending and people who've never worked before commit crimes, for example, or go homeless, or anything of the sort. So basically, I think we need to, the whole hyperdrive into productivity has run aground. We have stagnant productivity growth now. We have 50 years of focusing on productivity, and we now have stagnant productivity growth in most of the West. I think now it's time.
Don't want to interrupt. I hate interrupting, but I just make the point. I can't believe it in my own country. Productivity is actually in quite serious decline.
It's right.
It's come back significantly since it's going down.
It's going down.
And it's not stabilizing. It's going down.
And policymakers have been hyper-focused on, this from government, policymakers have been hyper-focused on productivity. My argument is they've been overly focused on productivity. They should have been looking at how to create a healthy society with growing, stable families, growing labor force, young society. We're allowing our societies to age, and then we're asking why they're not productive. I mean, this should be really simple stuff. It's the economists' fault for focusing too much on productivity. There's a whole story behind that, which we won't go into. But the long and the short of it is, economists have focused far too much on productivity for intellectual reasons. They've spread that out to the wider society, and now we're in a big productivity trap. Well, we've tried that. How about we try and form stable, decent families, reproduce the labor force? Even if we have stagnant productivity growth, if we can get decent labor force growth, the economy grows.
So in Australia, the great debate at the moment is to apply even more pressure and more money for potential mothers to minimise their time out, have children, and get back into the workforce, get that productivity up. We need you in the workforce. It's really a social policy, in my view, not an economic one. I actually think economically it's pretty disastrous because they're not focusing on what really seems to be important, breed your future, to put it bluntly.
It's what economists used to call eating your seed corn, As the population
what a great term.
It's the seed corn. You can either eat it or you can plant it. And we're choosing to eat it. When the population started to decline, we didn't even consciously do it. As you say, it was a social policy. The feminism and so on became very popular. And the idea was basically that, well, we're not growing the society large enough anymore, but we have, roughly 50% of working adults aren't working as much as they should be. It's a myth to say women were working in the 60s. Young women were working in the 60s. But, you can get more labor out of that source. And so we tapped that labor source. We didn't think of it that way at the time. It was all caught up in, as you say, social questions and so on. But that's what happens. Well, it was one and done, right? We expanded the pool once. It was only once. And then the birth rate came down. And that's a big problem. Now, what am I advocating? Am I saying, chain the women to the stove or whatever? No, we can't do that. Like, even if we wanted to, we can't do that. And we probably shouldn't do that. But we need to figure out a way to make it so that people can have families. Now, personally, I think if given the opportunity and not if they don't feel compelled, many women will choose to raise their own children anyway. I just think the polling shows that very strongly.
Especially, we're here in Britain, 67% of British women, mothers and potential mothers, say they'd like to be able to have more time with their children. They're very frustrated by the cultural insistence, the economic imperative of having to work.
And as one of the speakers here, Miriam Cates, the ex-MP, is always pointing out, if you also poll people, not just women, on how many children they want to have, there is an enormous gap. I think it's a child or something between the amount of children people want to have and the amount of children they end up having. So the desires of the population are actually very different from what almost the economy seems to be imposing, or the government or the society, or some combination of all them seem to be imposing on people. We definitely don't want to do anything that's coercive, especially to women. That would be awful. It wouldn't sell well politically. It wouldn't be fair, and
wouldn't be liberal.
That. It wouldn't be, well, I just think it wouldn't be fair. I mean, I don't think it has to be liberal. But I think that if we restructure society, if we try and restructure society in such a way that favors the family, I think people will find their own compromises with that. I think from the polling and so on, we probably know broadly what that's going to look like. But let people make their own choices on that one. Post-liberalism certainly isn't neo-authoritarianism. Make your own choices on that. But as a society, if we continue to ignore this, we're finished. Our economy, our prosperity, everything's finished.